My name is Rosalind Cross, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a gynecologist in a major medical center here in the States. Before we dive into my story today, I want to encourage you all to subscribe to this channel and give this episode a thumbs up if you find it meaningful. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to light. My mother, Beatrice Pembroke, was recognized as the National Teacher of the Year, having nurtured countless honor students throughout her distinguished career. Yet somehow, I had been a complete academic failure since childhood, failing every single subject without exception. After yet another delicate conversation with my homeroom teacher about my poor performance, my mother finally reached her breaking point. The frustration and disappointment that had been building for years erupted like a volcano that could no longer contain its fury. "How could I have given birth to such a foolish child? You must be here just to torture me deliberately," she screamed, her voice echoing through our suburban home with a venom that chilled me to the bone. For 3 entire days, she vanished without a trace, leaving me alone with nothing but silence and uncertainty. When she finally returned, she brought with her a girl who appeared to be roughly my age, with bright eyes and an air of quiet confidence that I had never possessed. "From this day forward, Esperanza is the true daughter of this family," my mother announced with cold finality. "And you are forbidden from calling us Mom and Dad ever again." Her words hit me like physical blows, each syllable carefully chosen to wound. "Get out of my sight. Only when you can achieve decent grades will you be worthy of being called my daughter." The years that followed were a blur of exile and struggle, until fate brought us together again in the most unexpected of circumstances. It happened at the hospital during a routine health screening for the teaching staff at her school. The educational supervisor spotted me immediately, her face lighting up with recognition. "Beatrice, isn't that your daughter Rosalind?" she exclaimed with genuine excitement. "She works right here. This is perfect timing for Esperanza's medical situation. You should definitely ask her to connect you with that new department head, Dr. Cross." I watched as my mother's eyes took in my white medical coat, her expression shifting through a complex array of emotions like clouds passing over a stormy sky. "This child never even bothered to tell me she changed jobs," she said with forced casualness, though I could detect the underlying surprise in her voice. I carefully used my sleeve to cover the identification badge hanging from my chest, which clearly displayed my title, Department Head of Gynecology, Dr. Rosalind Cross. Seeing that I remained silent while staring at her, Beatrice stepped forward and grabbed my arm with surprising force. "Your sister is pregnant and suffering from some mysterious illness that no one can diagnose properly. She's lost so much weight it's frightening to see," she said, her voice taking on an urgency I had never heard before. "Everyone says this Dr. Cross is a specialist in this field. You need to take me to meet her immediately." Her eyes sparkled with genuine desperation, and I could feel the perspiration on her palm as she gripped my arm. It reminded me of that terrible night when I was burning up with a fever of 104 degrees Fahrenheit, begging her to make me some soup to help me feel better. Back then, she had pushed my hands away with disgust and contempt. "With grades as pathetic as yours, you have no right to make demands of me," she had said coldly. "It would be better if you just died so I could adopt someone more accomplished instead." Now, I mimicked her dismissive manner perfectly, pulling my arm free with the same callous indifference she had shown me all those years ago. "Mom, I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about," I said in my most professional voice. "If you need medical attention, please follow proper hospital procedures and schedule an appointment. I cannot allow you to cut in line ahead of other patients." She stood frozen in place, while her colleagues looked on in stunned confusion. Beatrice had always been someone who valued her reputation above all else. After she had sent me away to live with my grandmother on a farm in Nevada, essentially abandoning me to fend for myself, She had maintained the public story that I was simply away for health reasons and recovery. Her decision to adopt Esperanza, a student from an impoverished background, had even earned her recognition on the school's official website, where she was celebrated as the city's beloved, compassionate Mother of the Year. Nobody knew that this seemingly perfect humanitarian was actually a woman who had callously abandoned her own biological daughter when she became inconvenient. As expected, I could see a crack appearing in her composed facade, though she was still fighting to maintain her composure and avoid creating a scene. "Rosalind, I understand that you're angry with me because you feel I haven't been paying enough attention to you lately, so you're acting out and refusing to even tell me about your work situation," she said, her voice taking on a pleading tone that sounded almost rehearsed. "But your sister's life is hanging by a thread right now. If you have issues with me, we can work them out later. Esperanza is completely innocent in all of this." The group of teachers surrounded me, and being educators themselves, they immediately began their well-intentioned but misguided intervention. "That's right, Rosalind. This really isn't the time to let your emotions get the better of you. You know there's no such thing as an overnight grudge between a mother and daughter," one of them said, with the confident authority that comes from years of handling teenage drama. "You're really being unreasonable here. Your mother has such a generous heart. Couldn't you try to learn something from her example?" Another chimed in, completely missing the irony of the situation. A nearby nurse, who had been observing this increasingly awkward family drama, finally decided to intervene with practical concerns. "What exactly is all this commotion about? Aren't you here for health screenings?" she asked, with barely concealed irritation. "We're about to close for the day, so if you're not going to proceed with the examination, please take this conversation elsewhere." The entire group fell silent for a moment, and then Beatrice, grinding her teeth in frustration, pointed directly at me. "Of course we're going to proceed with the examination. However, I don't want any of your regular staff to handle it. I want her to do it personally." The nurse looked confused and somewhat exasperated. "Ma'am, please don't make this difficult. You do realize that she's—" She began to explain. I caught her eye and shook my head slightly. "It's perfectly fine. You go ahead and handle your other duties. I'll take care of this." Following standard medical procedures, I began disinfecting the injection site and preparing the needle for Beatrice. As I worked, she spoke in a voice so low that only I could hear her words. "With those terrible grades you had back then, how on earth did you manage to get a job at a hospital?" she whispered with barely contained contempt. "I was actually planning to make an exception and allow you to come home for Thanksgiving dinner this year. But if you refuse to help Esperanza, then this family will have absolutely nothing to do with you from this point forward. Thaddeus and I have made our wills, and you won't see a single penny of our inheritance." Her smug expression and self-satisfied tone only struck me as pathetically absurd. After 10 years of separation, Beatrice still believed I was the same helpless child who had been thrown out of the house, left with no choice but to beg tearfully for her forgiveness and acceptance. I deliberately pressed the cotton ball against her injection site with excessive force, watching with grim satisfaction as she winced and grimaced in obvious discomfort. "Do whatever you please," I said with complete indifference. Once I returned to my office and closed the door behind me, I finally allowed myself to lean heavily against my desk, my hands trembling uncontrollably from the emotional shock. Hearing her voice again after all these years, I still experienced an involuntary physical reaction of fear and anxiety. During my childhood, after every examination period, Beatrice would use a wooden ruler to beat me until my body was covered in bruises and welts. "Why are you so incredibly stupid? Why can't you solve even the simplest problems?" she would scream while striking me repeatedly. All the other teachers' children at our school managed to earn A grades. You're making it impossible for Thaddeus and me to hold our heads up in public." I would curl up in a ball, crying and screaming for help. "Daddy, please save me." My father would sigh heavily, his face grave with disappointment and concern. "Rosalind, can't you just try a little harder? Your mother has developed severe anxiety because of your academic performance. Do you want to drive her to a complete mental breakdown?" The truth was that I was suffering just as much as they were, because I had dedicated every waking moment to studying, except for the time I spent eating and sleeping. However, whenever I tried to focus on my textbooks, my mind would inevitably wander to distant places, and no amount of effort could help me maintain concentration on my studies. It wasn't until I reached adulthood that I learned about a condition called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. A simple medical evaluation and proper treatment could have made all the difference, but they had never cared enough to seek that kind of help for me. I knew Beatrice well enough to understand that she would never simply give up and walk away from this situation. Sure enough, the next day after work, my professional phone began ringing insistently. "Dr. Cross, I think I overheard yesterday's patient causing quite a disturbance in the medical affairs office. She seems to be filing some kind of complaint against you," my colleague informed me with obvious concern. Before I even approached the medical affairs office, I could already hear my colleague's defensive voice drifting through the door. "Ma'am, it's not that we're being uncooperative with your request. The problem is that this Dr. Rosalind Pierce you keep mentioning simply doesn't exist in our system," she was explaining with strained patience. Beatrice's voice grew increasingly shrill and demanding. "Stop trying to cover for her. Yesterday, she was the one who drew my blood, and several of your examination room nurses witnessed the entire incident." I pushed open the door and stepped inside, and her eyes immediately lit up with vindictive satisfaction. "Well, look who decided to show up." My colleague looked completely bewildered. "Her? But she's the new—" Beatrice quickly interrupted her explanation. "Exactly. I knew she was new to this position. Just look at what she's done to my arm." She rolled up her sleeve dramatically, revealing that the injection site from the previous day was now red, swollen, and surrounded by numerous small, angry-looking bumps. It was already extremely painful when she inserted the needle yesterday, and when I made a quiet comment about it, she deliberately pressed the cotton ball against my wound. The security cameras captured everything. Now I can't even bend my arm properly, which is interfering with my ability to grade papers. Isn't this clearly a case of medical malpractice? I could immediately tell that this was simply an allergic reaction, and I suspected that Beatrice had deliberately caused it in order to create grounds for her false accusations against me. My colleague took a deep breath, clearly trying to maintain her professional composure. "Well then, let me arrange for you to have a proper medical examination first, and then we can discuss any potential compensation." Beatrice quickly pulled her sleeve back down and shook her head vigorously. No, that's completely unnecessary. I'm not here today to extort money from your hospital. I have exactly 2 demands. First, I want this incompetent medical practitioner to be suspended from duty immediately. Second, my adopted daughter is currently pregnant and suffering from a rare medical condition that no one has been able to diagnose properly. I've heard that your new gynecology department head, Dr. Cross, is supposed to be exceptionally skilled. I want her to serve as my daughter's primary physician. Before coming here today, I already filed a complaint with the State Health Department. If you cooperate with my requests, I'll withdraw the complaint. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll keep escalating this issue to higher authorities, and I'll come here every single day to cause a scene until you give me what I want. My colleague's pupils dilated in shock, and she struggled to suppress what appeared to be either laughter or complete disbelief. I looked at Beatrice calmly and spoke with cool professionalism. You claim to have a respectable career, yet here you are behaving like some kind of common troublemaker. Don't you find this behavior embarrassing? Beatrice's gaze flickered uncertainly for a few moments. Well, it's all for the sake of my daughter, it's absolutely worth it. I remembered when I was in middle school and my homeroom teacher mistakenly believed I was involved in some kind of romantic relationship. She was furious and demanded that my guardian come to school immediately to discuss the situation. However, both Beatrice and my father were too embarrassed by the accusation to show up and deal with the problem. I had fallen to my knees, crying and begging desperately. "Mum, I swear I didn't do anything wrong. Please come to school and explain the truth to my teacher. Besides, if you don't go, she's going to be even more angry with me." She had slapped me hard across the face and said coldly, "You deserve whatever you get. This is your own problem and it has absolutely nothing to do with me." I spent that entire day being denied entry to my classroom, standing in the hallway while being verbally attacked by the male students' parents and all of my teachers in front of the entire school. Now, it was astonishing to see that she could actually swallow her pride when necessary, just not when it came to helping me. I let out a soft, bitter laugh. "The hospital administrator is on his way here now. You can wait to speak with him." While we waited, I casually picked up the medical files that Beatrice had slammed down on the desk and began flipping through the first few pages. Esperanza's symptoms clearly matched the hormonal disorder that I had been researching extensively. The condition had already progressed to the point where she was experiencing periods of unconsciousness, and there was a serious risk of losing both mother and baby. Without immediate medical intervention, I estimated that she would likely survive no more than 2 weeks at most. I was about to examine the documents more thoroughly when Beatrice snatched them away from me aggressively. "Stop going through things that don't concern you. Do you even have the medical knowledge to understand what you're looking at? These files are specifically for Dr. Cross, and I don't want you damaging them." The hospital administrator must have arrived while we were talking because I suddenly heard his voice behind us. "Dr. Cross, the person you're looking for is standing right here." Beatrice stared at me with wide eyes, scanning me from head to toe, and then burst into derisive laughter. "Please don't joke around with me like this. I'm here to file a complaint against her, but I need Dr. Cross to treat my daughter's medical condition. Someone with her limited intellectual capacity couldn't possibly be qualified to impersonate a medical specialist, could she?" I stood behind her and gently shook my head at the administrator, signaling him not to reveal my true identity. He frowned in confusion, but maintained his diplomatic approach, clearly hoping to resolve the situation peacefully. "I understand the situation completely. Here's what I propose. I'll personally accompany you to the dermatology department to treat your skin condition, and our hospital will cover all medical expenses. As for the Dr. Cross situation, I'll make the necessary arrangements. For now, why don't we all apologize to each other and consider this matter resolved?" She slammed her hand down on the desk with explosive force, her eyes filled with unmistakable disgust and contempt. "Absolutely not. If we let someone with such poor medical ethics off the hook today, who knows how many more patients she'll harm in the future." Beatrice's obsession with suppressing and controlling me bordered on pathological fixation. When I was a child, she had falsely accused me of stealing a ring from the house and beaten me mercilessly without allowing me to defend myself. Even after she later found the ring sitting in a drawer exactly where she had left it, she still looked down at me with cold superiority. "Well, it's still your fault. If you had helped me find it before I started hitting you, none of this would have happened." In her twisted worldview, I was always wrong, no matter what the circumstances might be. I crossed my arms over my chest, having already made my final decision about how to handle this situation. Perfect, because I have absolutely no intention of apologizing to someone like you either. I'll fully cooperate with any investigation, and I'll expose your lies for what they really are. I've also contacted my attorney, and he's advised me to sue you for defamation. You can expect to receive legal papers very soon. Oh, and since you want me suspended from duty so badly, fine. I'll give you exactly what you're asking for. I removed my identification badge and placed it face down on the desk in front of everyone. Administrator, you don't need to try to talk me out of this decision. Please process my suspension paperwork immediately. Beatrice clearly hadn't anticipated my response, and she seemed almost frantic with rage and confusion. Fine, you need to be suspended for at least 1 month, plus a public notice to serve as a warning to others. The administrator waved his hands helplessly in frustration. Everyone needs to calm down here. Beatrice, didn't you say you needed to find Dr. Cross to treat your daughter's illness? If I suspend her right now, what's going to happen to your daughter's medical care? Beatrice's eyes widened in complete bewilderment. What exactly are you trying to say? Are you threatening me now just to protect some inexperienced medical trainee? Let me tell you something. My daughter's case is extremely rare and valuable. Your Dr. Cross should be grateful for the opportunity to work on such an excellent research case. She'd be incredibly fortunate to have this chance. My emotional state became strangely calm and detached. All right, Administrator, there's no point in trying to reason with someone who's completely unreasonable. I'm volunteering for this suspension, so please just proceed with the paperwork. He was still hesitating. I know you're angry right now, but we're supposed to be guided by medical compassion. How can we just... Beatrice had completely lost any ability to engage in rational conversation. She held up her cell phone dramatically, making sure everyone in the room could see the contact name displayed on the screen. My patience has limits. This situation needs to be resolved immediately, right here in front of me. My colleague's husband works for the State Health Department, and one phone call from me could bring investigators here to examine your entire hospital operation. Do you really want to test me? I bet your institution has plenty of secrets that wouldn't stand up to scrutiny. The administrator finally gave up completely. Fine, fine, fine. We'll do exactly what you want, but don't come crying to me later when you regret this decision. The paperwork was processed with remarkable speed, and news of my 1-month suspension quickly spread throughout the entire hospital. Beatrice watched me with triumphant satisfaction, and I immediately turned around and walked out of the medical affairs office without another word. Behind me, she was still demanding that the administrator summon Dr. Cross for an immediate meeting. The next moment, Beatrice flipped over my identification badge and saw what was written there. When she finally comprehended the words before her, her face turned ashen. Gynecology department. She works in gynecology but still refused to help Esperanza. She's exactly as despicable as she was when she was a child. A 1-month suspension is getting off way too easy. They should revoke her medical license entirely. A few days earlier, while I was rushing to save a patient's life, my identification badge had accidentally fallen into a water basin and was severely damaged. The name and title had been worn away completely, and I hadn't yet had time to get a replacement card made. Seeing the administrator's continued silence, Beatrice's tone became even more arrogant and demanding. Administrator, let's get to the main point here. I want to meet with Dr. Cross immediately. The administrator rubbed his temples wearily. Dr. Cross just sent me a message. She says she's willing to serve as your daughter's primary physician. However, she's not currently at the hospital, so you'll have to wait. Beatrice exploded with indignation. Wait for what? A patient's life can't wait around for anyone's convenience. Taking up a hospital position while neglecting actual medical duties is completely unacceptable. I'm going to report all of you for gross negligence. My colleague finally couldn't contain her sarcasm any longer. Maybe you should ask yourself why she's not at the hospital right now. If something terrible happens to your daughter, it'll be entirely your fault. Beatrice thought for a moment, seeming to realize something important. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick stack of cash, throwing it down on the desk. Oh, so this is all about money. Just tell me how much she wants under the table, and our family can afford to pay it. The administrator tried to put the money back in her bag, but she kept forcing it into his pockets. While the two of them were struggling over the cash, Beatrice's phone suddenly began ringing. As soon as she answered, her face changed dramatically. What? Esperanza has fallen into a coma. Her blood oxygen saturation keeps dropping. She looked around desperately at the administrator, who straightened his rumpled clothing and spoke with professional gravity. We should arrange for an immediate transfer to another hospital. I'll help you contact Dr. Cross about everything else. While Beatrice had been spouting nonsense throughout this entire ordeal, she had made one accurate observation. Esperanza's medical condition was indeed a perfect match for the research case I needed for my current academic paper. If I could successfully complete this case study, I would be able to expand the global understanding of pregnancy-related hormonal complications. When it came to advancing my career, personal grudges and emotional baggage could definitely take a back seat. However, while I was willing to save Esperanza, Beatrice would have to pay a price for her behavior. After the administrator had settled them in at the hospital, he called me privately. Dr. Cross, the patient's condition has stabilized for now. When are you planning to return? I was relaxing in a massage chair, sipping fruit juice. She's not going to die anytime soon. Have the deputy department head handle things for now. Tell Beatrice that she can either wait for me or find a different doctor. On the first day, seeing Esperanza's improved condition, Beatrice managed to control her impatience. On the second day, she returned to the medical affairs office to cause another scene, but this time the administrator was prepared and had security escort her out. She stubbornly continued filing complaints, but my suspension notice protected me from any consequences, and since the injection incident was clearly a false accusation, the authorities simply ignored her. By the fifth day, Esperanza had fallen unconscious again, and this time even the deputy department head was struggling to manage her care. Beatrice finally reached her breaking point and overturned every medicine bottle outside the patient room. Even if she thinks she's some kind of royalty, she can't just toy with people like this. I want you to know that many of my former students are now in leadership positions. I'm going to call them right now, and if she doesn't show up today, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of place this is. Her destructive behavior was all captured on security cameras, and the administrator quickly stepped in to intervene. Dr. Cross just contacted me. She says she'll be back tomorrow. However, since this involves introducing a new treatment protocol, she wants to have journalists document the entire process through a live broadcast. If you agree to this arrangement, you'll need to sign these consent forms. Beatrice was beyond rational thought at this point, desperately grasping at any hope of saving Esperanza. She signed every document without even reading them. Stop wasting time. As long as Esperanza can survive, she can do whatever she wants. Early the next morning, I entered the patient room with my team. Beatrice hadn't slept all night, and her eyes were red and swollen as she stared directly at me. She blinked slowly twice, then rushed toward me aggressively. What is some suspended waste of space like you doing in here? Today is the day Dr. Cross is supposed to come treat Esperanza. Don't you dare interfere. The live broadcast had already begun, and Beatrice's rude behavior was being filmed and transmitted to viewers. To avoid disrupting normal hospital operations, I had requested that they use discreet recording equipment, so she was completely unaware that she was being filmed. The informed journalists were already shocked by what they were witnessing. "Ma'am, how can you speak to a doctor that way?" Beatrice snorted with contempt. "What doctor? Can't a mother discipline her own daughter anymore?" Everyone present made sounds of confusion, and I pointed toward the inner room with a cold expression. "That's not right. Your adopted daughter is in there, isn't she?" Or maybe Beatrice is getting old, and her memory is failing, so she doesn't remember what she said before. During my sophomore year of high school, after I had ranked dead last in midterm examinations, Beatrice brought home Esperanza, an orphaned student who ranked first in our grade, and announced her intention to adopt her. I lost my private bedroom and was forced to sleep on the living room couch. My meals went from nutritionally balanced to little more than thin soup and scraps. Beatrice treated me like a stray dog, providing only the bare minimum to keep me alive, nothing more. Meanwhile, she showered Esperanza with affection and attention, fulfilling her every desire as long as she maintained excellent grades. When I was exhausted from hunger and asked her why she was treating me this way, she put leftover food in a dog bowl and threw it in front of me. "You're nothing but a defective product. Why would I waste resources on someone like you?" After I recounted this history, the patient room fell completely silent. Beatrice's face showed nothing but indifference to my pain. "Did I say anything wrong? I carried you in my womb for 9 months and gave birth to such a useless child. It's been nothing but bad fortune for Thaddeus and me. If I hadn't found someone accomplished to replace you, what would I have had to look forward to in my later years? And you should stop playing the victim. I at least continued to provide for you. But what did you do?" She spoke each word deliberately, staring at me with the eyes of someone looking at their worst enemy. "You tried to kill me. Ever since Esperanza had moved into our house, I hadn't eaten a proper meal. One day when I came home early from school and was desperately hungry, I began searching through every cabinet and drawer looking for something to eat. Beatrice strictly controlled our snack consumption, so there was nothing in the refrigerator except for some juice buried under a pile of vegetables in the bottom drawer. I was so urgently hungry that I grabbed the nearest cup and poured the juice directly into my mouth. When Beatrice returned home, I hadn't had time to clean up the evidence. She saw the bottle on the floor and grabbed my hair violently. "Rosalind, you've completely broken my heart. You knew perfectly well that I'm allergic to mangoes, that even touching them could send me into shock, and you still poured mango juice into my cup. I should have had an abortion when you were still in my womb. How does someone as evil as you deserve to live in this world?" The bottle had been labeled entirely in English, and I hadn't paid attention to what kind of fruit it contained. But before I could explain myself, she attacked me like a wild animal, punching and kicking me until I gradually lost consciousness, with blood flowing continuously from my nose and mouth. That night, instead of taking my battered body to the hospital, she dumped me at my grandmother's farm in Nevada. "From this moment on, pretend you never had a daughter like me." For the next 10 years, Beatrice never once came to see me. Her version of events caused everyone present to look at me with suspicion and disgust. I felt like I was back in that moment when I had been falsely accused, and anger surged through my body, causing me to tremble slightly. "Beatrice, you're the stupid one here." At that time, I didn't have a single penny to my name. I was so hungry every day that I could barely walk straight. Where would I have gotten the money to buy that damned mango juice? Her pupils trembled slightly, as if she was beginning to remember something important. The door to the inner room opened, and the deputy department head emerged. "Dr. Cross, the new medication you brought has been administered. The patient is awake and wants to speak." Beatrice's expression froze completely, and she stared at me as if she had seen a ghost. Wait, what did you just mean by that?" "Dr. Cross, you are… What are they talking about?" Her eyes darted frantically between all the people in the room, but everyone remained diplomatically silent. I composed myself and stopped paying attention to her, walking directly toward Esperanza's room. After using the biological therapy I had brought, Esperanza's complexion had improved dramatically, and she was able to speak normally. With my assistance, Esperanza sat up in bed and looked toward the stunned Beatrice. "Mum, I heard everything you were discussing out there. The mango juice really wasn't bought by Rosalind. I bought it. But when you beat her so severely, I was honestly too scared to admit the truth." Esperanza's favorite fruit had always been mangoes, but after moving into our house, she never had the opportunity to enjoy them again. When her craving became unbearable, she secretly bought a bottle of mango juice and hid it in the refrigerator, never imagining that I would discover it. Beatrice gasped heavily, her voice beginning to shake. "How is that possible? Are you telling me that I accused that waste of space wrongly?" And after she left me, she actually managed to become… She left that final sentence hanging in the air, but Beatrice's eyes now held a subtle hint of hatred and resentment. I understood exactly what she was thinking. Beatrice often said that having children was like making an investment, and that worthless stocks didn't deserve love. At that time, she didn't care about the truth at all. She simply wanted to eliminate me as a failed investment. But Esperanza, who had initially been an excellent student, became mediocre under Beatrice's oppressive educational methods. Meanwhile, I had flourished in Nevada under my grandmother's nurturing care and the individualized attention of local teachers, finally discovering my natural talents. For Beatrice to realize that her educational philosophy was fundamentally flawed was more painful than death itself. I took the documents that the deputy department head had prepared and began explaining the surgical procedures with clinical detachment. While the situation appears stable at the moment, the hormonal imbalance in her body is like a ticking time bomb. Surgery must be performed immediately. This is the surgical consent form, and this is the agreement for the procedure. Since we'll be using cutting-edge medications that I've brought back from Europe, all costs will need to be paid by the family. During the recovery period, she'll also need to continue using biological treatments from my mentor's laboratory. Because this condition is so rare, there's insufficient global data available, so we cannot guarantee that both mother and baby will survive. We can only promise to do everything possible. The estimated medical costs will be approximately $120,000. If you agree to these terms, please sign the documents and arrange payment so we can begin surgery immediately. She threw the documents back in my face. "Are you people completely insane? This is highway robbery. It's not that our family can't afford this amount, but you're obviously trying to scam us. I absolutely refuse to pay." Esperanza's face turned pale, and the monitoring equipment suddenly began emitting sharp warning sounds as a spreading patch of red appeared on the bedsheets. I rushed over to provide emergency care, but the bleeding was uncontrollable, and all of her vital signs were declining rapidly. I shouted desperately, "Hurry, she can't hold on much longer. If you don't sign the consent forms and approve surgery right now, both mother and baby will die." Cold sweat dripped from Beatrice's forehead as she gritted her teeth with malicious determination. "Well, that's what happens when you people make unreasonable demands. I refuse to pay such an excessive amount." Everyone around her began frantically trying to persuade her to reconsider. "Mom, this is your daughter we're talking about. Please just sign the papers." "Exactly. You made such a big fuss before because we thought you cared so much about your daughter. How can you change your attitude completely just because of the price?" Amid all the criticism and pressure, Beatrice finally exploded with rage. "Esperanza is just an ordinary government employee. $120,000. Do you have any idea how many years she'd have to work to pay me back? I adopted her because I was betting that she would become successful and give me a comfortable retirement. I didn't sign up to have my retirement savings drained." As precious time continued to slip away, the alarm sounds from the medical equipment never stopped. Esperanza was losing more and more blood, and the deputy department head was shaking his head grimly. "It's over. This is the end. Even a miracle worker couldn't save her now." I pressed down hard on the bleeding site, locked in a standoff with Beatrice, while sweat poured from every part of my body. As Esperanza's breathing became weaker and weaker, I was on the verge of giving up hope entirely. Then a familiar voice spoke up. "I'll sign the documents." It was my father, Thaddeus. After completing the paperwork, he turned around and slapped Beatrice hard across the face. "Enough! Do you have any idea what my relatives and colleagues are saying about us right now? You're becoming more unreasonable with every passing year." She stood there in shock. "What relatives and friends? What are you talking about?" The journalist pointed to the small camera attached to his chest. "Now I understand why Dr. Cross suddenly decided to do a live broadcast and asked us not to bring large equipment. If we hadn't filmed it this way, we never would have been able to expose your disgusting behavior." The television station had promoted this broadcast in advance, and Beatrice's outrageous conduct had caused the viewership to skyrocket to the day's highest numbers. "That evil girl planned this deliberately. She's holding a grudge against me. She intentionally waited until I was emotionally unstable to humiliate me in public." Beatrice tried to rush into the operating room, but Thaddeus grabbed her around the waist and held her back. "You've already made yourself into a laughingstock. Do you want to turn our entire family into a joke?" She was completely lost in madness and immediately tried to hit him back. "We're already divorced. You have no right to control me. And what did I do wrong anyway?" The two of them became locked in physical combat, and nobody felt inclined to intervene. They only stopped when both were gasping for breath from exhaustion. Then, a young woman who had been silently taking notes among the journalist team removed her face mask and approached Beatrice. "After 10 years, you're still exactly the same, teacher. You always think you're never wrong. Do you remember who I am?" Beatrice stared at her face and waved her hand dismissively with obvious irritation. "I've taught thousands of students over the years. How could I possibly remember every single one? And all of you need to turn off those damned cameras right now, or I'll sue you for violating my privacy rights." The young woman smiled knowingly. "Teacher, you forgot that you already signed consent forms, didn't you?" "Well, I suppose you really do have a selective memory. 10 years ago, you not only sent away your own daughter, but you also forced one of your students to transfer schools. I guess you don't remember any of that either." Beatrice took a step backward, her expression showing growing disbelief. Her obsession with academic achievement hadn't been limited to me. She had been even more demanding and harsh with her students. Zhang had been one of the struggling students in her class, consistently scoring below passing grades on practice examinations. In pursuit of higher class averages, Beatrice would routinely verbally and physically abuse Zhang, even bringing her home once and forcing her to kneel while correcting her mistakes. That's how Zhang and I had originally met. Later, when Zhang got into a physical altercation with some male students during gym class after they made crude jokes about her, Beatrice finally found the excuse she had been looking for. The male student was one of the top performers in our grade, so his parents weren't even contacted about the incident. But Beatrice used accusations of violating school rules and having poor moral character to pressure Zhang's family into arranging a transfer to a different school. "Because of you, I spent an entire year seeing a therapist to recover from the trauma," Zhang said with quiet intensity. "Every time I saw you receiving another commendation or award, I wondered how someone with such poor professional ethics could be allowed to continue teaching children." Beatrice's clenched fists began to tremble and she screamed her rebuttal. "Every teacher prefers students with good grades. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for not working hard enough. I've been teaching for so many years. I've produced so many honor students. I've done right by the school and by everyone. You poor-performing students just have bad character to begin with. Don't you understand basic respect for your teachers?" The online comment section was already in complete chaos. "Oh my goodness, it really is her. I still remember when she humiliated me for 40 minutes straight just because I took a sip of water during class. That's nothing compared to what she did to me. She used to hit students with a pointer when the cameras weren't rolling. I still have a scar on my eye from her, but back then I was too scared to speak up. If this had happened now, I would have sued her into bankruptcy. What an absolute psychopath. She ruined all of us and then her own children too. How did someone like this ever win teaching awards? That school system is completely corrupt." While Beatrice was still attempting to present herself as some kind of educational authority figure, the deputy department head rushed back into the room. "Stop arguing, the surgery is finished." Esperanza had actually been suffering from a type of pregnancy-related immune rejection syndrome, where hormonal mutations cause the body's cells to attack both the mother and fetus. The treatment required targeted medication to control the cellular response, followed by gradual removal of the damaged tissue. I had worked with my mentor in Europe to successfully treat this exact condition before, and because we had intervened early enough, both mother and baby survived safely. However, after that day, Beatrice never once visited Esperanza in the hospital. Thaddeus paid for part of the medical expenses, and Esperanza said she could cover the remaining costs herself. During a routine follow-up appointment, she took my hand. "Thank you for saving me, and not just physically," she said with tears streaming down her face. Looking at Esperanza's tearful expression, I felt my own eyes becoming slightly warm. A month before these events, she had been desperately searching online for clues about her condition and had asked a friend to put her in touch with me. The moment we met face to face, I had immediately stood up to leave, but she quickly grabbed my arm and broke down crying as she apologized. "I'm so sorry. I was such a coward back then. Seeing that you're doing so well now makes me feel relieved. I stole your mother's love from you, so I would understand completely if you didn't want to help me." That instantly calmed me down because I realized that my real enemy had never been Esperanza. We were both victims of the same toxic situation. After I left home, her life hadn't been easy either. Beatrice's need to control every aspect of the people around her extended to every detail of daily life. My father had eventually divorced her because he couldn't tolerate her behavior anymore. From that point on, she had focused all of her oppressive energy on Esperanza. Every moment of every day was planned and controlled according to Beatrice's demands. If Esperanza spent even one extra minute in the bathroom, Beatrice would pound on the door. Living in constant fear and anxiety, Esperanza had developed panic disorder, which caused her SAT scores to plummet dramatically on test day. Even after she managed to get married and start a family, Beatrice immediately focused her attention on the unborn child. She made unilateral decisions about every aspect of the baby's life, from the nursery decoration to prenatal education and future schooling plans. Naturally, her husband's family was not pleased with this arrangement, which only made Beatrice more self-righteous in her approach. "You people who have barely read any books in your lives have no understanding of proper education," she would say with insufferable arrogance. "You should consider yourselves incredibly fortunate that an outstanding educator like me is willing to take responsibility for this child's development." Esperanza's husband and his family couldn't tolerate Beatrice's condescending attitude, and they eventually chose to separate from her. The day I learned about the staff health screening at her school, I had gone there specifically to discuss Esperanza's situation with Beatrice. But her superior attitude immediately brought back memories of my traumatic past, and my long-suppressed anger finally erupted beyond my ability to control it. Actually, when she first learned about my illness, her immediate reaction was to tell me to get an abortion or just stop treatment altogether, Esperanza explained. But she had recently won another award from the district, and she was afraid that news of family problems would damage her public image, which is why she became so aggressive about finding treatment. After all these years, I've finally seen through her completely. She only loves herself. I gently squeezed Esperanza's hand in return. At least now she can't hurt anyone else anymore. The scandal involving Beatrice was so extensive that the school fired her immediately and posted public notices severely condemning her behavior. Initially, she was unconcerned, believing that her impressive resume would allow her to find an even better position elsewhere. However, even the suburban schools that she had previously looked down upon told her directly, "We could never hire a teacher with documented ethical problems." Not only that, but many of her former students organized together to report her previous violations of professional teaching standards. Beatrice's teaching certification was permanently revoked, and the career that she had been most proud of was completely destroyed. Thaddeus didn't escape consequences either. He was severely criticized online for his failure to act, and investigators also uncovered evidence of his own misconduct toward students, leading to his suspension pending a full investigation. I continued methodically treating Esperanza's condition while living my normal life. Then one day I received a phone call from the police department. "Is Beatrice Pembroke your biological mother? We need you to come down to the station." When I saw Beatrice, she looked thin and haggard, and the arrogance in her eyes had been replaced by panic and confusion. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse and barely recognizable. "You destroyed my career, took Esperanza away from me, and caused Thaddeus to cut all ties with me completely. Do you think you've won? Even if you changed your name, you're still my biological daughter. Young man, please explain to her that daughters have a moral obligation to support their parents financially." The police officer's expression was indescribable, but he reluctantly nodded in acknowledgement. Her eyes gleamed with insane satisfaction as she pointed her finger almost directly at my face. "You see, no matter how much you hate me, you still have to support me until I die. When you think about it, I actually came out ahead, since I supported you for 10 years less than I should have. I had anticipated that she would eventually become this desperate. Of course I understand my legal obligations, which is why I'll provide you with only the absolute minimum living expenses each month. If you're dissatisfied with the amount, you're welcome to file a lawsuit, assuming you can afford the legal fees. This is the last time you'll contact me through the police. The next time we see each other will probably be at your funeral." Beatrice collapsed in her chair like a dying fish, but then began screaming desperately once more. "Wasn't I a good mother to you in the beginning? When you couldn't memorize your lessons, I stayed up all night helping you study, not getting any sleep before going to work the next day. When you were failing every subject, I took you to every hospital in town to have your intelligence tested, but you just refused to try harder. As a mother, all I wanted was for my daughter to be successful. How does that make me some kind of terrible criminal?" I looked at her with pity. I was already successful enough, and Esperanza was successful enough too. You probably will never understand what respect and love actually mean. You may not deserve death, but for someone like you, dying alone is the most appropriate ending. I walked out of the police station without looking back, and shortly afterward I received a phone call from my grandmother. She sighed deeply on the other end of the line. "Is it really over? Do you really have to be this harsh? I know she has a terrible personality, but she is still your biological mother." My thoughts drifted back to those years of struggle and hardship. When I first arrived in Nevada, the living conditions were difficult, and since Beatrice refused to provide any financial support, I had to survive on my grandmother's meager retirement income. Fortunately, she never gave up on me, paying for my education and encouraging me to study hard. My attention deficit disorder was noticed by my homeroom teacher at the time, and my grandmother immediately took me to see doctors for proper treatment. Once my condition improved and I was able to overcome my psychological barriers, my grades steadily improved. For years, I had hoped that Beatrice would come back to visit me, right up until my SAT examinations. I made a firm declaration to my grandmother. "After the SAT is over, I'm going to legally change my name and take your surname from now on. It's no longer about her not wanting me. Now it's about me choosing to completely break free from my toxic family background." I chose the name Rosalind Cross because I didn't want to aim for great heights and ambitious goals. I simply wanted the opportunity for a fresh start at life's crossroads. When I returned to the United States, my grandmother had also wondered whether she should inform Beatrice. I immediately refused. She abandoned me during my worst times, so what right does she have to share in my best moments? We'll see what happens in the future. This city isn't very large, so we might run into each other someday. At that time, I thought that if she was no longer the same hateful person, perhaps we could forgive and forget the past. But the facts proved that people really don't change their fundamental nature. Looking at the sunshine outside, I shook my head with continued determination. Compared to everything she put me through, what I'm doing now isn't harsh at all. I'm finally free. This story reminds me of an important truth. Some people treat children as investments, expecting returns while forgetting that love is the foundation of all education. True maternal love is not about control and possession, but about respect and understanding. When someone only knows how to take without giving, they inevitably end up harvesting nothing but loneliness. Sometimes, the best liberation comes from learning to say no and learning to protect ourselves from toxic relationships. After all, we cannot change other people, but we can choose who we allow to walk alongside us in life. That's the story for today. Hope you enjoyed this incredible tale. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe for more captivating stories like this, and don't forget to like and share this video. Thank you for being here. See you next time.